when Trump got to Washington, they did the same thing. They said, oh, you don't have the experience. You have to give confidence to the establishment. And they picked everybody that was in his cabinet, from John Bolton all the way down, and every one of them stabbed him in the back. So what they're concerned about, why they hate Trump so much now, is that he understands the game. He now sees what I'm saying. And if he gets in there, he's basically saying, sorry, I'm putting in my own people this time.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Martin Armstrong is with us to share some prognostication, some wisdom, and some hope, hopefully, for the future. Marty, it's great to have you back on. So first, we got to talk about the election. What is Socrates saying now? Is it anything changed?
No, Socrates still shows that Trump would win, rather, significantly. And this trend is global. So if you just look at the June 9th elections in Europe, they all went, dramatic shift to what they call now the far right. Everything is upside down. The far right is anti-war today.
Yeah.
And the centrist, once World War III, but so, that was kind of a shock in Europe. But this is the trend. The people themselves, they don't want war. The war nonsense is all from elites, basically. So my concern is that, as you know, I know a number of these people for decades. And, as I've said before, I think that when Khrushchev had said, we will bury you, they were about, we're going to show you, we're going to take democracy to the world. Well, when communism fell, I think, honestly, that they just never really paid attention to that and then they transferred it into just Russians. Because, as I was working with the Reagan administration back then, when Reagan wanted to meet with Gorbachev, they were against that. They said, oh, you just can never trust the Russian. So it was no longer communism. It was just Russians. Yeah. So I think, honestly, that they just want war because communism fell and they didn't get to shoot anybody. I don't know. They spent their whole life in that mode of just hating Russians. So I just don't see how they're willing to let that go. And I'm concerned that Trump is anti-war, and they are so close to the brass ring here that they got their perfect president, Biden. He just does whatever, he's on the cue cards. And I don't know. Personally, I think that they will do something, stage some sort of a false flag, even, go as far as to assassinate Trump. Because the computer shows he's going to win. The same thing you just saw in Russia, in Europe.
Right.
But then they're out of power. It was Victoria Nuland's husband, Kagan, who wrote that piece, oh, Trump will be a dictator, in the Washington Post. Well, what he doesn't say is that his wife, Victoria Nuland, was in every administration except for Trump's.
Right.
Yes, dictator because he won't hire my wife, So I don't know. It just doesn't look good.
They're saying now that, Trump is going to go after the people on The View, or it's better known as The Spew, as Rachel Maddow on MSNBC can go up and lock all these people up. Now, as appealing as that might be, because not from the standpoint of punishing them, but just from getting their screeching off the air, that's just never going to happen.
No, it's that's, this is part of trying to make it sound like, he's going to be a dictator. This is, I find it absolutely astonishing. They say, oh, this is a fight for democracy. And then they support Ukraine. Well, what did Ukraine do? Suspended all elections.
Yeah.
That's democracy.
That's our role model.
The Minsk agreement was supposed to let the Donbass vote. And that's what this war is all about. They instantly attacked the Donbass, shut down the Minsk agreement, and yet we're fighting for democracy. It's just like I said, the far right is the anti-war now, where maybe in the 60s they were the warmongers. It's just like everybody's cross-dressing anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't know who is what. It's kind of a mixed up, crazy world. So turning to the economy, we've seen gold, hit 24.50. We've seen silver break $30 the ounce. Are they heading higher?
Yes. The economy turned with our economic conference model on May 7th. It's already, you're starting to see, a couple of central banks lowering interest rates. Consumers are pulling back because they don't trust the future. When you get all this crazy stuff going on, and particularly going into this election, I think that, there's just so much uncertainty that people are going to hold back on their spending, et cetera. That creates the recessionary atmosphere. And I don't see that subsiding until, next year. But overall, we're looking at an economic decline generally into about 2028. So it's just recessionary time. This is basically what happens. And you with all this, I don't know. I think Hillary started it by calling anybody that voted for Trump a deplorable. And it just created such a polarization. Even in Canada, they're expecting U.S. to go into civil war.
Yeah.
You can't, demonize the opposition. And that's what's happening. And when you do that, you divide the country so much. That's basically the same strategy that Hitler did. When you demonize, it started with the Jewish bankers, then the businessmen, then get all of them. When you demonize a group of that nature, and it doesn't matter which one you're talking about, you divide the country, and there is a lawsuit by unions. I think it was in Atlanta against Amazon, and what came out was Amazon's diversity index.
Yeah.
And the more diverse you have a workforce, the more likely they will not unionize. If they're all white, then they get together. If they're all black, they get together. But if you keep dividing them up, they naturally fall back to their little groups. They don't communicate with each other. And it was very interesting. And Amazon called it its diversity index. More diverse, the more division you get. And that's pretty much the same tactic that you're seeing out of the Biden administration. Honestly, most people never even heard of a transgender before this stuff. It was not on the radar or anything else. We've had offices in Thailand, and that's probably the capital of sex changes in the world.
Right.
And they're all over the place there. But the difference is they call themselves ladyboys.
Yeah.
They don't say you have to call me a woman. You can no longer call your mother a mother. She's a birthing machine. Where's all this craziness come from? It's not diversity. It's not discrimination. You actually create the discrimination with all this stuff. I'm not going to call my mother a birthing machine. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, so a recession from like going basically from now into 28. So what does that do to the world stock markets, the U.S. market? And are we still going to have inflation while this recession's going on?
Yes, you still have the, it'd be more of a stagflation, kind of like the 70s. The stagflation in the 70s came because you had the OPEC crisis, and that forced energy prices up dramatically. And so you ended up with increasing the cost of production, and that exceeded the economic growth. That's where we're at now. And they did that with COVID, and that created, inflation from shortages, all right, rather than demand. And not speculative demand. It was more shortages type thing. And I'm concerned that, I put out a report on the 2020 coup and what really happened. And it's got nothing to do with voting machines and somebody counted twice or whatever. It was basically staged in Congress. And I put in the report, the FBI had so many people there that testified before Congress, they couldn't even tell them how many operatives they had there. All right. They probably basically broke the glass to get everybody to go in, because once they went in, that gave Pelosi the right to implement emergency rules. There were 7 states that were going to challenge the vote. If one of them had worked, Trump would be president. All right. So she basically shut down all the ability to make any objections. But the Constitution also states that, or the way the law is that what happens if there's going to be a challenge to the vote, it has to be debated before the full House. Right. She then used COVID and implemented COVID rules so that only 53 people could be on the floor at one time. That's how they stole the election. Now, what I am concerned about is you're seeing this stuff with the bird flu again.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're risking your life to go vote, do it by mail-in ballot. We're back to the same thing again. And that's why I think the computer is showing such civil unrest. Nobody's going to accept this election again.
So
it's just chaos.
So as far as I read an article you wrote that the current occupant of the White House, his approval rating is actually 8%.
Yeah, who is
8%? They must be working for the government, right?
Pretty much. I mean, even if you look at Gallup's poll that they put in there, and who has absolute faith in the government, that's down to 10%.
Really? That much?
Yeah, that's in the Gallup poll.
That much?
I mean, it's just like, I don't know. I guess they got to be, the ones that on, LSD from the 60s or something. I don't know.
He never came down, I think.
I guess so. I mean,
or they keep getting it.
I mean, even when I go, like I said, I was just in Europe for a couple of weeks visiting a bunch of people, and everybody is the same. What is going on in America? Are you guys becoming a banana republic? They see these charges against Trump as absolutely ludicrous. $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, and they point out, well, Bill Clinton gave $850,000 to another sex thing. How come that wasn't charged? It's this. There is no rule of law anymore.
No, but we know that from your case. We know that from your case. It's been eroding for decades, and this is what we're left with. So, Socrates, have an opinion whether Trump's going to go to jail or not?
No, I haven't looked at that. If I was him, I would.
Yeah, well,
because,
in all their help.
Well, he would be celebrated there like unbelievable. But because most of these people hate the establishment as is. And even back when they were messing with me, they were like, more pro-Trump than anything else. So, I mean, it would just be, I think they would be insane to do that.
But they are insane.
But, they think that bringing these charges would discredit him. And it's had the exact opposite effect.
Yeah.
He raised nearly $500 million, and it's made people around the world look at the United States and say, what is going on?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the performance of Biden at the G7. I mean, Zelensky had to get up and walk around the table to even wake him up. I mean, it's just so pathetic. And, the questions were, who is really running the government? And I told him it's all the unelected people that are there in Washington.
A junta. It's a junta running the country.
Look, I mean, people have to understand, there is really a deep state behind. Before 99, I was part of the vetting process. I'd go around, I meet with people who wanted to be president, whatever. But they were sending me in to tell them how the world economy worked. And it was really a vetting process. And I would get back and they'd say, well, what do you think? Can he handle it? Is he smart enough, etc.? Then 99 came and I was asked to go down to Bush Jr. They said, oh, but this one's different. I said, what's different? I said, no, he's really stupid. I said, what? And I swear to God, this is what I was told. And I asked him, why would you make somebody stupid president? Which is exactly the opposite of what we were doing, for a couple of decades. And they said, look, he's got the name and we can win. Yeah. And I saw, how this works. They are the ones that picked the cabinet. And it wasn't Bush. Bush didn't, pick Cheney. They did. I was even asked back then if I would take the chief economic advisor in the White House. I said, thanks a lot, but not interested, When Trump got to Washington, they did the same thing. They said, oh, you don't have the experience. You have to give confidence to the establishment. And they picked everybody that was in his cabinet, from John Bolton all the way down, and every one of them stabbed him in the back. So what they're concerned about, why they hate Trump so much now, is that he understands the game. He now sees what I'm saying. And if he gets in there, he's basically saying, sorry, I'm putting in my own people this time.
You want a friend in Washington, get a dog, as the saying goes.
Yeah, and they probably kick them down the street too. But
yeah, well, I'd say that the current occupants' dogs, the two of them have attacked the Secret Service 21 times and drawn blood. What is going on with that here, Martin? What's that about?
I don't know. It just look, even things I was told from the Secret Service back in the Clinton days, I don't even want to repeat. But it's just we live very interesting times. Certainly, as I guess they say, the Chinese curse, right?
Yeah. So stock market, right? Kind of it out of nowhere in April makes new highs. Are we going to continue on with this? The recession, is it going to kill it? NVIDIA, is it just going to become a 3-stock index here? 5 stocks, 10 stocks? What's
basically what you're looking at? And I know there are a lot of people saying, "Oh, there's going to be the crash of the century coming." Most of those people have not really done their homework. All right, if you look at 1929, and that's what they seem to be comparing to. In 1929, we had a balanced budget. All right, so the depression was the dollar went up because we had a balanced budget. All right, so everybody went to the dollar. That's why, Roosevelt confiscated gold to devalue the dollar. This time, it's exactly the opposite. Do you want to sell all your stocks and go buy, Biden's bonds? Come on, so yes, the stock market will come down initially, as it usually does when there's uncertainty with war. But then people are going to figure this out, and it's going to go up. All right. This is what you're really looking at. And I know people are calling it, oh, this is the bubble of everything. It's the bubble of everything because basically it's government that's the problem this time. And I mean, we have major, pension funds. One of the biggest around, started dumping government bonds and moving to corporate. And S&P went in and said, hey, you're taking on more risk. And they said, no, we're using Armstrong's models, and we verified he's correct. It's the government that defaults, not the private sector. If General Motors goes bust, they take all the assets, they put it up for auction, you still get something back. When the government goes bust, you get nothing back. And so a lot of people, the amount of money in government bonds versus equities and private sector is about 10 to 1.
Right.
So it doesn't take that much for people to say, wait a minute, these guys want war. They're going to be spending a lot more money now than before. And the bonds will go down. But this is why Powell came out in December. And as you know, I have dealt with central banks for a long time. And I know the game there too. It's been like rule number one, you do not criticize your government.
Yeah.
When Powell came out in December and said this spending is unsustainable, that was the first time the chairman of the Federal Reserve criticized the administration since 1951.
Mm-hmm.
That's showing you the problems that exist. And I can tell you that the central banks have a major crisis in that, the whole idea of Keynesian economics is failing. Mm-hmm. When Keynes came up with this idea, again, back in the 30s, the U.S. had a balanced budget. Mm-hmm. So if it raised interest rates, it was affecting us, not the government. Now the government's the biggest borrower in the room. They raise interest rates to try and reduce inflation. And what happens? The interest on the national debt goes past $1 trillion.
Right.
The Fed has actually been stripped of any ability to deal with this. And, they don't want to publicly come out and say this, but I can tell you, like the 87 crash, you had, at that point, you had the Plaza Accord at the end of the summer of 85. And that's when they stood up and said, oh, we're going to make the dollar down, move it down 40%, blah, 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 to help trade. And, that's when I went to Reagan. I wrote a letter. So you're going to cause a crash in about, within 2 years, because they had sold a third of the national debt to the Japanese. And now you're going to lower the dollar by 40%. They're going to sell. Well, why would they sell? Because they're going to lose money yet, So what happened? And then you can look at the next event was the Louvre Accord. And that was in February of 87. That's when they all got together again and they said, oh, okay, fine. The dollar has declined enough. Once the dollar continued to decline, what really caused the 87 crash was people woke up and said, oh my God, the central banks in this G5 nonsense and G7, they can't stop it. That's where we're at. Once the people, it's going to be an awakening moment where they finally realize, I don't care what the Fed does, raises, lowers rates, they can't stop it. When you reach that point, as we did going into 87, that's when you get the crazy period. All right, and central banks can't control inflation. They can't control anything because they increase the interest rates and the government spends more.
Right.
So, you have to understand, we are really between a rock and a hard place.
Mm-hmm.
The stock market will pull back to retest support. And that's typical when you have, drum beating for war, and et cetera. then people are going to realize, oh, wait a minute. It's the bonds that are going to crash because these people are just going to be issuing endless amounts of bonds. And, what I can tell you is the real crisis of the Biden administration is that he spends most of his time in Delaware.
Yeah.
He's not there for these cabinet meetings. And so what happens is you have this issue. You have the State Department under Blinken, for example. And Blinken basically is threatening China over, Taiwan, etc. Well, China is the biggest holder of U.S. debt.
Mm-hmm.
The first quarter of this year, they started dumping. They sold $53 billion. That means they're not going to be buyers in the future. If you cannot sell the new debt to pay off the old, that's when the default comes. So you had Janet Yellen hopping on a plane going over to China. Oh, please buy our bonds. And then they look at her and like, oh, what? You want us to lend you $100 million so you can buy some missiles to shoot us? I mean, there's no, I don't know. The Biden administration is so bad because we don't have a president that is strong. And at these cabinet meetings, he's supposed to be the referee. But all these agencies are acting like 2-year-old kids. They all want their own way. Yeah. And if nobody basically sorts it out, you've got, the State Department threatening war, the Treasury Department unable to sell the debt. Hello, does anybody understand what's going on here?
All right. Well, craziness. The stock market digests all this, tests its support, and then goes higher?
Yeah. You have no other choice. You're going to buy more bonds from these people? They're going to default. And I can tell you the reason they need war, that will be the excuse to default. And what they do is you can look at all the different defaults that are going back, even the United States. We defaulted basically on the Continental Congress. They said, oh, we'll honor those debts. They never did. When a new government comes in, it says we're new. We don't have to pay the debts of the old.
Right.
All right. So this whole digital currency thing, well, people are arguing over that back and forth. They've missed the point that it's the IMF that has created their own coin. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
And they are pitching it to replace the dollar as a reserve currency so that every country will have their own digital currencies. But then for international clearance, it would then have to go back to the IMF coin. This is part of this one world idea of the government. Mm-hmm. And I put a video on our site of the former president of France, Holland, with Merkel standing in Parliament saying the reason they formed the EU was one government would end European wars. Mm. And this is the same theory that they are taking. And I can tell you what they think is going to be the way they intend to play this out. It will be the UN that appears to be the peacemaker with Russia. And then everybody will hail the UN. And then the IMF will issue their coin, replace the dollar, because the whole BRICS thing, that's about the fact that the neocons used the dollar as a weapon against Russia. Mm-hmm. So that's why you have these other countries moving to BRICS. It's not fiat or anything else because everybody's currency is fiat. It has to do that they use the dollar as a weapon.
And they could be next.
And yes, exactly. They seized all the assets on deposit of Russia and handing them to, the profits of that to Ukraine. They can do that to any country.
Yeah.
China, whatever. So why would you have any money in the West?
It's kind of like they crossed a barrier, they crossed a line in the sand. It's the same thing with the judicial system, weaponizing that. If you're going to take out your chief political opponent using the judicial system, then nobody is safe. So these are really big, earthquake type events that are felt all over the world, in the country and outside the country.
Yeah, it's lowered the respect for the United States tremendously. Like I said, I met, with meetings in Europe, and the conclusion was we're a banana republic.
Yeah, well, we've been heading that ways for a while here, let's face it, They abuse. That's my concern with these neocons. Once they got control, they put in these sanctions against Russia. It's undermined the German economy more than anything. So you're looking at recessions there. And they only look at their own agenda. We got to get those Russians. That's it. And they don't care about the economy. They don't care about your future, anything. And you have, they've got the press in their pocket. And, I just find it amazing. Putin comes out and says, you really want World War III here? And the Western press, he's threatening war. No, he's warning you. Is this where you want to go? It just, I don't know. I've never seen such despicable, mainstream press ever in my life. Yeah, well, they've abdicated their role for sure. All right. Well, Martin, it's always a pleasure having you on. Make sure you go to Martin's site, ArmstrongEconomics.com, and we'll throw a link in the show notes to this interview on FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. Make sure you sign up for your free newsletter. Marty, always a pleasure. Thanks for stopping by.
Well, I hope we at least woke up a few people and at least understand what the trend really is.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.